Welcome to the Muscle Expert Podcast with Ben Pakulski, one of the world's top professional bodybuilders, an expert on human performance and mindset mastery. Ben dives deep to deliver the strategies of the top experts to upgrade your body, mind, muscle, strength, performance, biochemistry, and how to become the upgraded modern man. Join us on benpakulski.com to learn the cutting-edge techniques to take control of your body, your brain, and create your greatest life.
Hey, welcome back to the Muscle Expert Podcast. I am your host, Ben Pakulski. Thank you very much for tuning into the podcast. If you love it, give us a share, leave us a review on iTunes. You can also access the show notes at benpakulski.com/podcasts. Head on over there and leave us a review as well. And I hope you guys enjoy it. Have an awesome day. Building muscles, building minds. I love you guys. And today's podcast is brought to you by ATP Labs. We've just released a brand new product that you guys are going to love. It's called MyoPrime. And this is just a creatine-based product with some ATP and HMB. And the reason I love this product is it's kind of an add-on to your current pre-workout. So you guys know I'm not a big stimulant person, but I am a big focus person. And creatine really helps add to that focus product that I always take. So you guys know I'm a big fan of the GF, which is growth factor by ATP, which is primarily just alpha-GPC and tyrosine, driving up some dopamine and acetylcholine in your brain. But if you want to add the pump factor and the cellular energy to that so that you can have the fuel you need to fuel your workouts, then I highly suggest you add MyoPrime. And if you think I'm cool, I think you're cool too. So if you use the code BEN10, B-E-N and the number 10, 10, you get 10% off this month only. Enjoy the podcast. You know, it's like this transcendence of humanity right now. Everyone's, it's this conscious awakening and everybody's kind of realizing that they're unhappy with certain things in their life and they're trying to transcend it. So I'd love to go, so just roll right into it, Phil, start giving me a little bit of insight about, finding clarity and what that looks like and what's really necessary to kind of optimize that process.
Yeah. So to me, clarity is, a lot of people are coming at this from a very intellectual standpoint and they're looking for kind of a very intellectual process to it. And again, it's not a criticism. It's just purely an observation. And I get that. I understand that. So somebody said to me last night, well, what's the 3 things as a parent I could do better? And I said, well, I'll give you one. Well, why don't you just, lean in and grow yourself and do the things you know you need to do, address the misalignments in your life, look after yourself.
The paradox of parenting, right? Everyone thinks you got to read parenting books.
Yeah, exactly. So, she says, tell me what I can teach my kids. And I said, don't teach them, show them. Yeah. So that's the process. Yeah. As far as I'm concerned, that is the process, period. But going back to the clarity and even that wording, like, finding, because again, that's the term that most people, how do I find clarity? And even that terminology almost like if you think about it, like, where would I find a 20-pound dumbbell? I mean, that's probably a laugh to you. Well, someone with little skinny arms like me, right. That's what I sometimes look for. Where would I find a 20-pound dumbbell, right? So I'm looking around the gym. Somebody didn't put it back. Somebody's using it. Maybe they don't have one. I don't know. But I think clarity is internal. It is all internal. And I can give you numerous stories to illustrate and to prove the point that the clarity that we seek is already there. Now, what I'm saying is that even if we're just open to that possibility, as frustrating as it is, like, people actually get angry with me and I say, you don't know what you want to do next? And they go, no, I have no idea. So, well, what if you did? Well, that's stupid. Because I'm telling you, I don't.
It's fear.
No, but what
right?
if you do know? What if you do know, but you're just scared to get to it, or fear. It means something that you're afraid to address, or it means you have to put yourself out there and succeed or fail, or you have to finally name the thing that you desperately want to do above everything. Because here's the thing, we're okay failing at the shit we don't want to do. Yeah. But can you imagine if you uncover what a human being, their destiny, what they're here to do in this earth, and they have to step in and do that? Imagine failing doing the very thing we're here to do. Like, there's nothing after that. That's just a big dark black hole, and there is
failure,
no
right?
bottom.
There's only ways of learning that this way didn't work. What's next, ultimately, right? Once you've committed, you just commit.
Yeah, and I don't think you can fail doing the very thing that you're here to do, as long as you do it in a way that supports who you are at the core. So to me, just on a very basic level, number one is making sure that you challenge yourself and think about the clarity that you're seeking as something that is already there. It's dormant, it's there, you just need to dust it off. Now, what gets in the way of that? That's a better conversation, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. So first of all, you said you had some examples. I'd love to dive into it, because like I think conceptually I get it. Like I understand that it's already there. I already know what I need to be doing, but I'm just afraid of failure. Like that's ultimately the reality. There's, I know what I love. I know how I love impacting people, and the only thing stopping you from living that life is, your fear of what other people will think, your fear of what your parents will think, your fear of what your friends will think. And that's, I'm aware of that. But I think our audience needs to have a little bit more clarity on, maybe some examples that illustrate, maybe a time when someone went through this and found their clarity of purpose.
Yeah. So I'll give you an example of, I shared last night. So I did a talk in town here last night, and there was a gentleman who came to, it was called a clarity retreat. Yep. And the whole idea was to come with an area that you were seeking clarity in. And of course, X rarely ever marks the spot, as Indiana Jones famously said, one of my little heroes, if you like. And this gentleman finally came to the conclusion. And again, another great simple thing is just forget about focusing on what's next, and forget about what you could do with your life and what you need to change. I think there's something deeply powerful about recognizing where you're at. So one man said to me at a conference one day, he says, okay, I really don't like what I do, and I want to pivot, and I want to change, I want to do something else. And I said, what do you do? And he says, well, I've been in the software business for 14 years. Sorry, excuse me, he didn't say 14 years. He said, I'm in the software business and I don't like it. And I said, and I looked at him, and I just looked at his energy. I looked how he was describing it, and I said, the pain is not bad enough. He goes, excuse me? I said, the pain's not bad enough. And I'm sure you've heard the dog and the nail, the two old guys sitting at the veranda, and the dog comes up, curls up, sits on the exposed nail, and his buddy goes, your dog's on a nail. He goes, yeah. Keeps drinking his beer. He goes, hey, your dog's on a nail. He goes, yeah, he'll move. And the guy says, when? He goes, when the pain is bad enough. And this guy looked at me, and he was a total stranger. I'd never met him before. And he looked at me as if to say, that's an outrageous statement. Like, how dare you tell me where I am in my pain threshold? And he says, I disagree with you. And I said, cool. I said, I don't know you, never met you before. I don't know how long you've been doing this thing that you don't like, but how long have you wanted to get out of this? And don't lie to me. Tell me the truth. It's in front of 600 people. And he goes, okay, 14 years. And I said, exactly. So I said, the pain's not bad enough. So you will keep doing that for his own personal self-worth reasons. Right. He'll keep doing that because that's what he feels he deserves. Yeah. But then I went into with the sledgehammer, and the emotional sledgehammer, which was, give me a name of one of your kids, which, by the way, he said to me, the reason I stay is for the money, and the money allows me to create a lifestyle and allows me to pay for my kids and go to all this other stuff. Now that's an excuse or a reason. Yeah. Either
He's
or. I'm not going
to
judge
suffer
it.
for his children, I guess.
Correct. And I said, so do your children know? And he goes, what do you mean? Do your children know that this is the story you're telling yourself in the world? I don't mind if you want to use your kids as an excuse not to grow and to stay in a job that's killing you emotionally and will eventually physically show up in your life and manifest itself that way. But why don't you just sit your kids down and let them know that you're using them as a reason or an excuse not to grow as a dad every single day? Just inform them, because you know what? They may have a lot of guilt and shame and judgment towards using them when they didn't know and they didn't have a choice. Secondly, as I said to him, I said, what's the name of one of your kids? And let's just say it was John. I can't remember. I said, John, 25, 30, 40 years from now comes to you, the same conversation. What would you tell John to do? Without missing a beat, he goes, instantly goes, leave. Step in, try something. At the very least, if you don't know what's next, at least get out of what you do know that's causing you pain. And I said, okay, great. Do you want that to be a lecture in 25 or 30 years from now? Or do you want that conversation not to even exist? Because if you don't change it, as you stand there in front of your son in 25 years from now, he's going to be standing there either externally or internally, rolling his eyes going, yeah, okay, Dad, yeah, are you finished? Yeah, okay, can I go to soccer now, or whatever it happens to be? But if he grows up in an environment where his dad takes risks, does the things that nurture him and lean in, and do the things that he desperately wants to do and run the risk of failing and falling flat in his face, he'll grow up in an inspirational environment that conversation will, number one, may not even ever have to happen, and two, if it does, he will listen because he knows you've done it.
Brilliant, man. So, I use that as my kind of guiding light sometimes too, is if I'm doing something in life, similar situation would have worked for this guy last night, is like, are you willing to sit down and tell your children that? Meaning like, kids, I stay in this job because I'm secure and I'm safe in it and I don't really like it. I hate it. Would you want to convey that message to your children, knowing that they're going to grow up with that in their head, that it's okay to sit and suffer in silence and not tell anybody, right? That's brilliant, man. I love that you went there with the kids.
Can I share one other one?
Please
Can I share
do.
I run an experience called One Last Talk, and I don't want to get into all the details of it, but I'm sharing this for a very specific reason. And it's you get on stage and you share your one last talk in 15 minutes. And it's not just big names, snazzy speakers with slick talks. It's everyday, ordinary individuals who have extraordinary stories. They just don't know it yet.
Right.
And one woman took up the challenge, stood on that stage and talked about divorce and divorcing her husband. And her daughter was in the room. Okay. And she talked about the shame and the guilt and how she messed up her kids and everything else. I then go to the daughter and I'd set this up, not the conversation. I would never do that because it's too manipulative. But I'd asked her, would you be okay if I asked you a question after your mom speaks? And of course, she's very wise and very clever, like most teenagers are. And she goes, what are you going to ask me? And I said, I have no idea. We'll see what happens. I go with the microphone after her mother, tells her a 15-minute one last talk. And the daughter sits there and then gets the mic, stands up and says, I'll give you my perspective. My perspective is my mother, despite the fact I love my dad and I love my mother and I'm devastated they broke up, my mother has taught me that it's not okay to stay in a relationship where you feel disrespected, unheard, and unseen in the world. And everyone was like looking at her going, oh my God, it was like, you couldn't have scripted the answer. And what it did was it gave the mother freedom to let go of a lot of the guilt, the shame, and the self-judgment she'd had for divorcing her husband, despite the fact that she knew it was the right thing to do. And it freed the daughter and gave the daughter this incredible insight as it relates to her moving forward and putting a value on herself as it relates to relationships in her life.
Man, hugely powerful, right? And sometimes we build things in our brain as we perceive they're going to be perceived by other people, right? We build it in our brain as being much worse than it really is. And we all live in that fear world where we build things in our brain rather than just doing them, and you realize when you do them they're really not so bad. Brilliance.
Correct.
Yeah, brilliant, man. Yeah. So you spoke about acknowledging where you're at. Do you have some tactical methods that you have for people to kind of dive deep into, hey, I want you to acknowledge where you are? Is there a process you go through with people? Because sometimes, as you know, people are so mindless and robotic in their day-to-day activity, they may not even acknowledge.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges in humanity today is asking people, inviting people, and challenging people to simply stop. And I mean really stop and ask themselves some very simple questions that they can't necessarily hide from. So even something as simple as like when I do my work, sometimes I walk in and say, what do you want to talk about this weekend to the group of clients? I'm meeting a bunch of clients this weekend. What do you want to talk about? And they'll all have the thing that, kind of keeps them safe. And I'll say, what's the very thing you don't want to talk about? And they'll all go, oh, Jesus, do you have to ask this question? They're all judgmental. And then they'll write down the thing and they don't have to share it. And I say, okay, it's up to you. It's up to you. What do you want to talk about? And they all know they need to talk about the very thing they're kind of almost avoiding to some extent. So to me, the process is very simple. I think it requires a tremendous amount of courage and wisdom to sit down and really assess your life and look at your life and say, am I really happy? And the word is not happy. The most powerful word in that sentence is really. Am I really content? Am I really, happy with my relationships? Am I really happy in the work that I'm doing? And am I really happy with the relationship with myself? Because you see that here's the challenge: as we assess our own life, we self-assess our own life. Let's assume you don't have somebody that can support you or coach you or whatever, and you don't want that, or you don't see the value in that, or whatever it happens to be. As we start to assess our own lives, we benchmark our lives based on historic precedents. So if I say to myself, well, how's my relationship with my kids? If I was to simply analyze that on my own, the only reference point I have is my neighbor across the road. Well, Jesus, he's a disaster with his kids. Right. In fact, he's never even there. My dad and myself, we were close, but we weren't that connected or whatever. And then I go to myself, well done, Mckernan. I tap myself on the back and I go, I've got a great relationship with my kids. The reality is on a scale of 1 to 10, it could be 6. I grew up with a 2, which I didn't necessarily with my dad, By the way, I'm using it as an example. I now have a 6, which feels like a mile difference, which is great. But I'm missing this huge opportunity called 40% at the very least of possibility for me to deepen a relationship with my kids in ways I can't even fathom and know how right now. So it's not a very deep process, it's really simply, do you have the courage to actually answer it and not bullshit yourself with the usual story and just challenge the story you're telling yourself? What if it's not true? What if you aren't happy doing what you're doing? What if you're too busy running so fast through life that you're afraid to stop and realize that you don't want to be a bodybuilder, that you don't want to be an accountant, that you don't want to be an entrepreneur, that you don't want to be in this relationship, that you don't want to live in the city you live in? And then people go straight away, they go back to the kids, they use the kids, but they also say, okay, but I don't like living in Boulder. I live in Boulder, Colorado. I don't like living in Boulder. Okay, fine. Okay, you got it out of me, okay? But here's the problem. I don't know where to live. And the problem is we're using our inability to know where's next, what the perfect destination is, as a reason to stay stuck. Okay. My view is, if I don't like Boulder, I move. People go, where? It doesn't fucking matter. Right. Afghanistan, in a cave. It doesn't matter. Right. You move based on what you know, not on what you do not. Act upon what you know, as opposed to, if you're in a shitty relationship with a man or a woman who treats you like crap, do you wait around for 5 years in the hope that, one, they change, two, that you bring a child into the world and it's some miraculous reason that changes the dynamic and it makes it more powerful? Or number three, that, you finally find somebody to replace them? No, you get out of the relationship because it's not working. That's the very time that you've put a value, you've put a stake in the ground saying, no, I deserve more. I do not deserve this. And then you get out and the universe will give you crumbs until you demonstrate that you have this courage to make a change. And then the universe will present you with the whole goddamn cake.
And oftentimes the fear of being alone is greater than the fear or the pain that they're receiving in that relationship, right? So it's one of those balance things, and people need to experience the pain like you spoke about with the first gentleman. So one thing I want to address a little bit deeper is not knowing how. So what if they just legitimately don't know how? So, you say you're a 6 out of a 10. It's obviously not you, but hypothetically, you're a 6 out of a 10 as a parent. You're a 6 out of a 10 as a business owner. You're a 6 out of a 10 as an entrepreneur or a leader or in fitness. You're like, man, I just don't get it. Do you have any next steps as far as allowing the listeners to start like, hey, man, here's how you fill the gap. Like, we have a visual of perhaps where we want to go, or maybe we don't even have that visual, So what are the next steps in the process here to get us moving in the right direction?
To simplify it, I and again, it doesn't sound simple, but it's action. It's acting again in what you know. And I'm going to give you another example. So, and this is where it frustrates people who live their life through the lens of spreadsheets and systems and multiple goals and live very much in their heads. Because my work is it's very simple by nature, and it lands definitely deeper in a more intuitive space to some extent. This is very powerful. I just think we live too much up here. So there's a gentleman who used the reason. I said, okay, finally, I'm misaligned in what I do professionally. Okay, finally, you got it out of me, Mckernan. There's my big truth that I've been hiding from the world. Now, I would do something different if I knew what it was. Now, straight away, he was basically asking me for a system of how to uncover. Right. But I looked him straight in the eyes, and I knew this guy knew exactly what he wanted to do. I knew he was bullshitting himself and me. And this is a true story. I looked at him straight in the eyes and I said, but what if you already know? And he goes, yeah, I've heard you say this before, Philip. I don't. And by the way, it's kind of annoying when you say that because I've searched really deep and I don't. I said, cool. Well, we're going to sit here until you do. And he laughed at me and he looked around and he realized I wasn't laughing. This wasn't a joke. And we sat in this hotel in Carmel. There was about 25 entrepreneurs. And we all sat there and I just kept looking at him. And finally, he got more and more angry and more frustrated and more pissed off with me, quite frankly. And finally he said, okay, I'd work with people. And I said, brilliant. Picking cotton? And I was being asked for a reason. And he goes, no, like I'd serve people. I said, what, burgers? He goes, why you be? I said, forget about me, just keep going. And he goes, and this was felt like 2 hours, but it was probably, this was going on for about 40 minutes. And up to this point, almost every entrepreneur in the room was looking at me going, Mckernan, what are you doing? Are you not listening to this man saying he doesn't know what he wants to do? And in that moment, he said to me, I'd create a movement around food. And his whole body changed, his whole language changed, his energy changed. And everyone in the room just went straight to him, went, you bullshitter. You've known, there's something, they could see there was something there. And then finally, I looked at him and I said, where? And he said, Toronto. I said, no, I'm asking for the street. That's how much belief I had that he had thought this through. And he named the street and the location. And then finally, and wait for this, you will not believe this. Well, you will, but you know what I mean. And he put his head down and he goes, okay, guys, I even have the menu. And he had literally had the menu designed for this movement and this location that he wanted to build around.
But he's
food.
afraid of rejection.
Now, that's maybe where I've either hooked people on this call or lost people, because they go, oh, up to the menu piece, you had me. There's a possibility that's me you're speaking to.
Right.
But I don't have the menu. That's the point. I don't have the detail, Philip. If we get caught in having, because people say to me, I want clarity. I say, well, describe the clarity you want. Let's just say they want to move into coaching, for example. They go, well, I want to learn how to coach, who to coach, what the business model is, who my avatar is, and how to make $250,000 doing it. And I go, you're looking for everything. You're not looking for clarity. You're looking for an answer. The clarity that they have is that they want to give back. They want to impact. They want to move the needle for somebody. They want to dedicate their life. That's the clarity. The detail actually prevents you from ever getting the clarity. So if we just focused on just the clarity around what it is your calling is, we can fill in the gaps. That's easy. That is so super easy just to fill in the gaps. Like I had a guy sitting in front of me, beautiful gentleman, has a sitting on this incredible opportunity. And he just keeps saying, Philip, but it's the how. It's the how. And I said, what do you want to do? He said, I want to create this impact in this area. And I said, great. Okay, well, we'll cover the how in 2 minutes flat, guaranteed. And he goes, Philip, that's not, I've spent months on this. I just don't know the how. I know the why. And I said, no, you don't know. You think you know the why, but you haven't connected emotionally with it. Because when you do, the how presents itself. And I looked at him and I said, okay, right, I'll prove it to you. What do you want to do? And he says, I want to impact, parents and kids and whatever. I said, where do you want to do it? Online or live? He says, live. Do you want to do it in a 2-day format or 5-day format? He said, 2 days. I said, where do you want to do it? He gives me 2 locations. I said, pick one. He picked one, and in less than 2 minutes, we had exactly the detail. Now then you've got the marketing and everything else. Sure. And I said, there's your how. There's your how. Right. And it's aligned. It's not about the how. This is a personal development challenge. This is a lack of belief. This is a lack of confidence, a lack of self-worth, that you don't believe that you're good enough and deserving of providing an environment and being the person that's an expert in that area. And he goes, I disagree. And I said, well, you and I will disagree till the day we go to our graves, because there's a reason you won't see the clarity. It's not because the clarity is not there. It's because you don't feel deserving of that clarity. Now we're going to the core issue of what's really going on with people who struggle with clarity. And I'm going to share one thing, and I'll shut up then. No. Is I've said something which sounds kind of weird, but this is so true about in everything I see. People will travel thousands of miles and give me, in some cases, thousands of dollars for the clarity that they don't actually want.
I completely believe that.
How is that?
Yeah, no.
People have sat in front of me going, but Mckernan, you're telling me I don't. I'm here. I've traveled to Ireland. I've traveled to this retreat in Boulder. I'm here. And I go, that's not enough. Your body's here. Your head is here. I want your soul. I want your heart. I want you leaning in, being prepared to be so vulnerable and letting go of all the stories you're telling yourself, even the one that you're not clear. And I want you to be open to the fact that we are so close to uncovering what it is you're here to do on this earth, not just today, but the biggest resistor is you, and you cannot even see it. You won't even see it. A guy in front of it, I did a keynote speech in Steamboat recently. It doesn't matter who it is, 100+ entrepreneurs. And this guy said, no, I'm completely open. And we were just debating. It got into this debate. And he said, but I'm so open. I said, but what if you're not? He goes, I'm so open. I'm just so open. And I said, with your permission, can I do an exercise that might feel I'm exposing you, but that's not my intention? He goes, yeah. I turned to the audience and said, raise your hand if you feel how closed this man is. And almost the entire audience put their hand up.
Right.
I said, you just can't see how closed you are because you're in it. You're so close to it. If you can get what this audience has just gifted you on a plate, if you can lean into that and you can work on that, it will change your life forever. Because it's easy to shoot the messenger. If I'm saying something today in this interview that pisses somebody off, somebody go, oh, that fucking leprechaun, he's just full of shit or whatever. And they can shoot the messenger, because what happens is I'm riling something in you that you don't want to address, you don't want to say, you don't want to face. So you'd rather shoot the messenger. But when you put it to an audience and you go back to your wife and say, this pissed me off, is there anything I need? Yeah, well, I've been telling you that for 25 years. We all know the things we need to work on. We all know the things we need to change. We may not know exactly the house, the condo, the street we want to live in if we don't want to live in Boulder, in some other city, in some other part of the world. But we know a lot more than we think. And again, act upon what you know as opposed to what you do not.
Amazing. So one thing you brought up there that I think it'd be a shame not to touch on is the idea of deserving. So people not feeling like they deserve it. Maybe they have some unconscious beliefs that are limiting their ability to progress forward. Talk about how we overcome that. So, we all have, baggage, right, from our previous relationships, from our parents, from our youth, from whatever, that make us feel like our self-worth is limited. Talk about that a little bit.
Okay, so even the term, and again, it sounds like I'm kind of nitpicking, but I'm not, and that is not my intention. But I want to challenge a lot of people's approach to this. Is how do I kill fear? How do I dominate fear? How do I blast past fear? How do I shoot it in the head? How do I do whatever these terminologies? Kill fear, go beyond it, eliminate it. It's not possible.
Right.
And I am 44 years old, and I did a talk in Boulder downtown last night, and I talked about the most humiliating moment of my entire life, which I've only shared publicly yesterday for the first time on a podcast, and then I shared it last night on stage.
And then later today.
Maybe. And I broke into tears.
Yeah.
And I stood there like a 12-year-old kid who'd just been humiliated all over again. It never goes away. The challenge is, when I hear you saying overcome, I get what you're saying. I believe what you're saying, right. And I agree with this, like, to the point where it doesn't control you. It doesn't hold you back. But the thing is, a lot of people are trying to get beyond the self-worth, beyond the fear, to the point where it doesn't exist, and they want to eliminate it. And I cannot tell you how many people I meet who tell me, I this is for this person. I mean, I'm super self-aware. I'd love you to work with my wife because, I'm fixed. I've dealt with all my shit. And I go, good luck with that one.
Sure you are.
And, hope that works out well for you. And the reality is they haven't. They have addressed a certain thing in their life, but because they've addressed it, they think they're beyond it. It's finding this balance to bring these things with you through life, to accept them. That is the greatest way to overcome any type of emotional discomfort, pain, anything that holds us back. It's not about eliminating it. It's about accepting it. It's about realizing that actually that humiliation happened for a reason. It equipped me at a level so I can empathize with people, that I can understand what I should and shouldn't do in this world. It gives me a benchmark. It informs me. Bring it with me, and it fuels me. Not a negative, angry charge because I've forgiven the person that, did this to me. And my little guy, I told him the story recently privately, and he goes, Dad, let's go back and find that teacher and show them what you do now. And I said, Charlie, no. I said, you know what? That was their shit. They were angry. They were pissed off. And they decided to take it out on a young boy who didn't deserve it, right. Your dad. So it's about how do we bring these things, like whether it's sexual abuse, whether it's physical abuse, emotional abuse, mental abuse, whatever it happens to be, a failure, bring it into your journey, accept it as part of who you are. Stop running from it. Stop trying to kill it. Take it out of the Pandora's box that you've buried 6 foot under the ground with a big safety lock on it, inside another safe. Take it out, embrace it, and bring it on your journey with you, and use that pain to connect and with other people and to make an impact in their lives. Because if you want to connect, I'll leave it at that for the moment.
I think that's truly the best advice that I've ever heard when it comes to that stuff. Because everyone's like, oh, you got to learn to overcome it, or you have to learn to, forgive, or these terms that often come up around those unconscious limiting beliefs, and those can be very abstract for people. But I think the idea of acceptance, surrender, and bring it along as a toolbox, as a skill set for you is absolutely a brilliant way to frame that.
Yeah. So the best person in the world to empathize and connect with somebody who has had something done to them is the very person that's been done to them. Right. So, I talk a lot about this in terms of not just making an impact in the world, but aligning that impact to who you are personally. So you bring a part of you to the world. The reason I do what I do, and the reason that some people think I'm good at what I do, and maybe I am, is because I've been through this. I know what it feels like to do shit on this earth for almost 40 years of my life, doing stuff for everybody and everything, and looking for validation and looking for my parents' approval and doing what society wanted me to do and trying to build an empire of money so then I could have the freedom to go and do what I loved. All of that stuff that was so disconnected from me. And the reason I know now what it's like, I can literally feel what it's like for somebody to be doing something they don't want to do every day. Because I've been there. I know that pain. I know how horrendous it is, and I know the cost. And I was very slow getting there, 37, 38 years before I really pivoted. But you know what? I have no regrets as I look back. And I want to share one other very simple thing. A gentleman, very courageously, by the way, I really admire when people put their hand up and share something. He said in front of a group of his peers, and these are all pretty wealthy, successful entrepreneurs who are making really good money. And, I think it was, there was an actor, what's his name? The guy who does the painting, and Ace Ventura, help me out here. I don't know. Jim Carrey said, I would wish that everybody could become a millionaire so they could, even for 10 minutes, so they could realize that actually the money really genuinely doesn't buy the happiness.
Doesn't do anything.
And all of these guys were sitting around, and one guy raised his hand and he said, why am I never content? Why am I just never content? No matter what I achieve, what I do, where I go, what I buy, what I build, I'm just never content. And I thought it was a really courageous question, particularly in a room of all of his peers. And I looked at him, and this is the challenge of my work, I'd spend probably 90% of my energy distilling things in the world today that are taken for granted, challenging them and simplifying them and presenting to the world in a way that I feel simplifies them, makes them approachable. Sometimes the very intellectual people go, but it can't be that simple. Like, it just couldn't be. Right. I've spent 10 years in this. It couldn't be that simple. It always is. So I looked at this man and I could feel the torture in his eyes. Like, he has sat with this question, this idea, this concept for years, and he's beaten himself up about it. And in some way, he was basically sitting there saying, why am I broken? That's really what he was saying without saying it. Why am I broken? Why am I the one in the room that can't be fulfilled? Mm-hmm. And I looked at him and I said, what do you do professionally? He says, I'm a real estate construction, I have a real estate construction company, very successful one. And I said, great, do you love it? And he goes, no. And I looked at him, I just did this. Right. And he goes, what? And I said, how often do you go to work? And he said, well, pretty much every day, maybe at minimum 5 days a week. I said, many hours, 8 or 9, 10 hours. I said, how can you expect fulfillment doing something every day that costs you so much at a soul level? But here's where it gets really powerful, I believe. And I know that sounds super simple. And then one gentleman to my left goes, yeah, but he loves the results. Meaning he loves the ability to cut a check to buy the car he wants, loves to be able to cut a check to go to the Bahamas, fly first class, whatever it happens to be. And I said, really? The results outweigh the pain of going and doing something 8 hours every single day that is against who you are? Really? Are we telling him that, or are we asking him that? And he looked at me and he said, no, it doesn't outweigh that. And I said, it's that simple. I said, and here's the other challenge. When you go to work and do something you don't want to do, okay, what ends up happening is the other two areas of your life, like there's three main areas as I see them, the most core relationships, work, self, and others. So external relationships, my relationship with myself, and the relationship to the work I do, leaving God and spirituality out of the side, even though all of those are deeply and can be deeply spiritual. If you go to work every day doing something you don't want to do, here's what happens. Number one is don't expect to be happy. Don't expect to be fulfilled. Because I think to some extent you're spending most of your awake time doing something you don't want to do. Number one. Number two is, whether you like this or not, you will come home looking for the other two areas to prop up the area that of least fulfillment. So in other words, you will put pressure on your relationship to make you happy. And your wife, your girlfriend, your husband, your boyfriend, your fucking cat can never do that. They will always fail because they cannot live up to filling the gap in your soul when you go to do something 8 hours every day that's killing you emotionally. It's just not possible. And the strain and expectations in relationships are overwhelming. And that's why relationships are breaking down every single day at a much more accelerated rate as society speeds up.
Man, so powerful. So I know a lot of us are living that situation right now where something in our life is lacking, and we like you say, we assume we're going to go home and somebody's going to pick up that slack for it, and it's not happening. And a lot of people's relationships suffer right now because of that, because maybe they're under financial stress and now they get home and their spouse suffers a lot. So one thing, coming back a little bit, you started talking about how you were able to relate to people because of the challenges you experienced in your life, some of the obstacles you had to overcome. Obviously, those obstacles, those challenges are part of who you are. Do you advise people what is your advice? What is your feeling, I guess, around people chasing the obstacle, people chasing the challenge, and not necessarily chasing it, meaning like the idea of feel the fear and do it anyways kind of situation? Can you talk about that a little bit? Give me your take on how people should view fear and what relationship they should have with fear.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So in other words, if someone is really scared of heights, should they run out and do a bungee jump? Is that kind of, is that the, yeah, you know, I'm not a big proponent of that. I'm not a big fan of, you know, you're afraid of fire, feel it and run into a fire. I mean, you know, to me, it's, I would go deeper. Why are you afraid of fire? Well, no, because I'm just always afraid of it.
So say I'm afraid of leaving my job. I'm afraid of leaving my wife. I'm afraid of whatever. Like, what's that? Is it just go?
No. Yeah, it is go. Yeah, it is go. For sure it's go. But it's not go. It's go deeper. The challenge is too many people are jumping out of relationships, jumping out of this, jumping out of that really quickly. They jump into the next thing, but here's what happens. The pattern comes with them.
Comes with it, for sure.
The pattern comes with them. So they build another business, they build another app, they build another conversation, they have another relationship. And the same, there's a reason why the stats show that when you get divorced, the chances of the next divorce happening jumps massively. We're not talking 4%. I think we're talking about something like 60%. And then the next one is 80, 90%. So you haven't addressed the pattern. Why do you want to jump? Why do you want to leave your relationship? Well, because, you know, she doesn't respect me. I said, well, where does that come from? Well, nowhere. Just my wife doesn't respect me. No, where does it come from? Where were you not respected previously? Well, I never thought about that. And what's that got to do with any with Mckernan? So just bear with me. Where did you not feel respect? Well, my dad never respected me. Okay, have you ever worked on that? No. Does your wife know about that story? Or have you just assumed that, you know, it's all about the person, or is it really about you? Or is your wife respecting you in new ways that you're not even willing to see? Because you need to be respected in the way you want to be. She just doesn't know how because you've never told her. Brilliant. I spent my whole life waiting for my dad to put his arms around me and hug me, which is an alien concept for many people, and to tell me he loved me. And I was holding off. And as a grown man, I'm sitting there, when is this going to happen? Desperately yearning and needing this. And what I was unprepared to see is that my dad, every single month, and my dad doesn't have tons of money, drive to the local train station in Ireland, gets on a train and spends 30 minutes going into Dublin, gets on a bus and makes his way up to Dublin City, to this little shopping area, walks through the street called Grafton Street and picks up trinkets for the kids and special Cadbury's chocolate that you can't get in North America. He comes home, he buys an envelope, packs it all up in a padded envelope, puts a little note in it, goes down to the post office, posts it. Do you think he loves me? Of course he does. He just doesn't express it in the way that I was holding out for.
Right.
And I was unwilling to see how he was doing it. So one of the things I do, I work a lot with couples, is getting them to see how their stories are impacting their relationship today in ways they cannot fathom. So this competition of, well, why does Ben leave his bloody socks on the floor? It's so annoying. He's not doing it because it's an accident. He's doing it I think he's actually doing it to piss me off.
Right. He must be.
When in reality, that's nothing to do with that.
Right.
He's not doing it to be an asshole. He's doing it because that's all he knows. I'm using that as an example. So when you start to understand your story personally and then you reflect it back to your partner, the partner goes, oh my God, I didn't realize that happened to you. I never knew that story. Now I know why me leaving my socks on the floor annoys you. I'm so sorry. I did not know that. So the competition is replaced by compassion. It's an understanding of one's story, one's narrative. And when you understand the narrative, then you start to understand the person. So I don't know if that makes any sense, but that's hugely prevalent in relationships.
So one of the biggest obstacles I think a lot of people are facing is the unconscious need to overcome expectations. So, you know, Phil, you've got a career, you may or may not feel fulfilled. Obviously, you know, you're not a good example, but, you know, someone may not feel fulfilled, or maybe they don't love it, but they don't want to change to do something that maybe doesn't meet the expectations of their parents or of social norms. Maybe their true passion is to do something that maybe doesn't make them as much money, and they have to overcome this this fear of what other people are going to think. Talk about that a little bit.
Great, brilliant. Stay where you are. Don't change. And I know that's a smart ass. And that's not what you wanted necessarily,
right, no.
But that's one part of it is don't change. Move on. Just like, let them go, move on. Here's the thing is if you want to be authentic in your life and you want to do something that's in alignment with who you are and you want to connect with yourself and other people and you want to make an impact in the world, but you also desperately at the same time want to keep everybody happy, it's not possible. It's just not possible. It's not possible to keep your parents to love you the way they love you, your wife and your husband to understand you the way you want them to understand you, everyone in society to jump up and down with pom-poms as you turn around and share the vision for your future, which is out of societal norms. When I told my mother I was moving to North America to speak and to reinvent myself, my mother didn't understand what I was talking about. So one of the challenges is we all want to be authentic. We all want to make an impact. We all want to do something that gives us fulfillment. But the problem is we want to keep everybody happy at the same time. So the extent in which you care what people think about you, to some extent mirrors the extent of which you've limited your possibilities in your own life. I'm not saying no matter what you do, you shouldn't give a shit what people think about you. It's recognizing deeply how deeply you hold people's validation and assessing that as it relates to where you're in alignment, and asking yourself another very simple question is, am I going to stay doing what I'm doing because my dad thinks I should be an accountant? Am I going to stay doing what I'm doing because my mother's delighted I became a physician? Or am I going to die with regrets if I do not make a change right now? And that's where you make this decision for you. And here's the byproduct of that. It might require an awkward conversation with your parents. You might get some judgment for it. But in the end of the day, everybody's happy. Everybody eventually will work out because you're following your truth. And I'm going to give you a quick example of this. A client, I'll try and speed this one up, but a client said to me one day, I said to him, how's relationships at home? And he said, well, the usual with my mother. And I said, well, tell me what the usual is. He said, well, every time I go there, she's always asking me, was I in church? And I said, what do you say? And he goes, well, I just tell her I'm busy. I said, so you lie to your mother every week? And he goes, no, I am busy. I said, no, I know you're busy, but that's not why you don't go to church. You don't go to church because you don't believe. I can't tell my mother that. And I said, well, hang on a second. I'm not suggesting you tell her. I'm just going to let's get to the truth of what is actually going down in those moments. And let's consider if there is a conversation that needs to happen. But let's first get in touch with the truth. And we got through the truth is that he doesn't believe what his mother believes. He doesn't believe what she believes and holds spiritually. And he doesn't believe in the way she practices religion. So we eventually got to this conversation possibility with his mother. And the conversation could go like this. Hey, son, how you doing? Great. Yeah, brilliant. The first thing she'd say is, have you been to church? And he goes, no. And she goes, why not? And rather than saying, because I'm busy, he could say, Mom, do you really want to know the truth? Because I think you probably know it already. But do you really want me to tell you when I'm busy in work because you know that's not true? Or do you want to hear the truth? He says, she'll freak out. And I said, well, you think she will. This is back to your point about we take these stories and we conjure all these. But what if she doesn't? And what if she does? I said, number one is you're being honest. And when you're truthful, then it'll create the doorway for the next conversation, the next iteration, the next extension of the conversation. And here's the ironic thing about all of this. The reason she pushes religion on him is because she probably doesn't believe, and she's scared because she doesn't believe and she doesn't know what other options are available to her.
Right.
And when I said that to him, he just goes, oh my God. He said, you're so right. He goes, I know my mom doesn't believe deep down. And she's so insecure and so scared of that, she pushes it on me. There's something magical when you meet somebody that just believes something to their core that they don't need to sell it to you.
Right.
If you want to hear it, I'll tell you about it, but I don't have to sell this to you because you know what? I own this in my essence.
Right.
So the point is that I think there's this amazing opportunity to share your truth with the people around you and be unattached to their outcome, unattached to their approval ratings and so on and so forth, because I don't believe you can achieve both in the short term.
So for people that don't have a Phil Mckernan at their disposal on a day-to-day basis, how do they dig deep on this? You just said this guy came to you and said, I can't make it to church because I don't work. You're like, you were the one to call him on his words and say, no, it's because you don't believe. Not everyone has that person. What's the process that we can start going through to start unwinding? What are those beliefs that are truly our obstacles?
Well, they do have that person in a way. And this is where I suddenly, get myself out of a job. In the mirror, every single day, they've got that person. And I think there's no greater courage than actually facing yourself in the mirror every day and asking yourself the real questions and not jumping to a conclusion and an answer, but actually really challenging your own answer. Am I really that happy? Am I really that content? Is this really where I want to be? But the problem is that so fast, so quickly jumps to judgment. So quickly jumps to judgment. Well, I'm 40-something years old. I'm not making money. And I can't believe I don't have a pension. I can't believe this. And I thought I'd win 2 gold medals in my bodybuilding stuff. And I thought I'd be fitter. And look at my body. And I thought my body was good until Ben stripped off. And he was standing next to me in his Speedos. And then I'm thinking, holy shit, I'm inadequate. And the minute we go to the judgment, There's no growth in judgment. When judgment is present, growth is less than zero. It's actually minus. So I would love to say very respectfully is you do have a person, and that person is in the mirror every day. And I think we underestimate our abilities to, and we see this in Shark Tank. I don't know if you ever watched Shark Tank.
Yep.
There's so many people in that room that go in and they're unattached to the outcome. It's like the guy or the girl in the bar who doesn't need a relationship. They're the most attractive. They're not sitting there with their finger up in the air. They're one finger saying, leave me alone, piss off, I don't want to talk to anybody. Nor are they there staring at the door when you come in and trying to buy you a drink to get into a relationship with you or get into bed with you. Sure. The person is sitting there going, I'm open, but I don't need a relationship right now in my life. Is the most attractive person on earth. When it comes to business, the person that doesn't need to close the business is the person that's attractive because they're not being arrogant and complacent, but they're not desperate. You look at Shark Tank as an example, a great human example, a societal example at the moment. There's people going in there so desperate that if they don't have Kevin O'Leary on their team, they are going to fail miserably. I think it's disgusting. I think it's so unfair. And don't get me wrong, I watch it for entertainment value now and again. I mean, I'm so deeply curious of the human behavior that goes on. But there's people in there literally think that if they do not have a guru or a master or a mentor, they're dead. They're going to amount to nothing. Mentors can help you. Coaches can help you. Although there's a lot of coaches out there, you're better off with nobody. You're better off with a goldfish than some of the coaches that are going around the world today. I'm serious. But I'd love people to say, yeah, you know what? I'm going to take on a coach because that's what I want. Or I'm going to take on a coach when I'm ready. But I don't need it to be successful. The problem is we think we need these things, and without these things, we're missing. And if someone isn't in a financial position to take on a coach, they almost stay stuck even more because they feel like the problem is I don't have a coach. And what they're doing is they're externalizing and handing off the responsibility. Some of the best changes I made in my life is when I didn't have a coach. I do believe to my core, and I'm not just saying this because of what I do. I do believe my life is elevated because of other people in different ways and accelerated. Yep. But I didn't need a coach to get myself out of some of those shitty positions. And sometimes when we're too busy looking for the best coach in the world, we're blind to the people that are sitting around telling us the things that we want to hear. And I'm going to give you one example. Do we have time on this?
Oh, plenty.
The very first talk or speech I ever did was a best man speech. And I just did not want to be on that stage. And it was the Noel Theatre, and it happened to be a stage. The last place on this earth that Philip Mckernan wanted to be. Coming from like having no confidence, thinking I was a piece of crap, not liking who I was, dyslexic, lack of confidence, just feeling like I was broken. And suddenly I'm on this stage and I have to give a speech. And I'm just like, I'm dying right beforehand. And I said to myself, okay, you know what I'll do? I'll just try to be really funny. And then I decided, no, I'll just be clever. And then I was just like, oh my God, I'm just like all these masks. And then finally I just said, you know what? I'm just going to show up and I'm just going to share my truth. I'm just going to talk about the bride and groom as I see them. Of course, I'm going to make fun of my buddy and I'm going to, kind of slam him in front of everybody, which of course I did. And then I just shared my truth. And at the end of the talk, and I don't know what it's like in the United States, but in Ireland, you don't get standing ovations. And the crowd jumped to their feet and gave me this overwhelming standing ovation. And a lot of people assume that must have been an amazing feeling. It wasn't. I nearly died. I was so mortified. I was so inadequate. I just wanted the ground to literally open up and swallow me. But here's the magic. When I came off the stage and I was walking down, there was carnage. People were crying. And like whatever I said just touched people's hearts at some level. And this total stranger, who obviously was from the bride's side, this guy walks up to me with tears rolling down his face. And in Ireland, guys don't hug unless they're really drunk. And this guy wasn't even drunk. Puts his arms around me and says, man, he says, if I ever get married, will you be my best man? And I told him to go, you know what? And he goes, no, I'm serious. He says, you've got a gift. Now, in that moment, a complete stranger gave me an insight into myself that I didn't see, did not want to see, or couldn't see. He was one of the greatest mentors, and I don't even know who the man is. I try to track him down. I have no idea who this man is. So sometimes we're waiting for Gary Vaynerchuk, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful to these names. That's not to bless us and say, I give you permission. Steve Jobs, I give you permission. Gandhi, I give you permission. You've been touched by me. You're good to go. We don't need that. We don't need external permission. It can help when you have people to believe in you when you don't believe in yourself. That's what essentially I do for my clients. But if you don't have that luxury, if you don't have that possibility, don't wait around. Make changes yourself, because you know what? And really work on that self-worth piece. Really work on how you view yourself in the world. And the voices. If I could record how I spoke to myself 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, and I could play it now thinking, who am I talking to? Am I talking to some guy that I absolutely resent and hate with every bone in my body? We speak to ourselves in ways that is just beyond imagination, how cruel we are to ourselves. And where judgment is present, I guarantee you there is zero growth.
One final question for you, man. What if, I think this is important, what if my objective is not the same as my skill set? Meaning I realize my true passion for something is way over here, and what I'm really truly good at is a dichotomous thing.
Love that question. It's one of the best questions I've ever been asked. I love it. I love the way you've asked it, so thank you. That is an incredible question, and it's an incredible challenge and opportunity for the world today. My wife grew up being very good with numbers. She also grew up with poverty. She also grew up in a schooling system that had a career guidance person that helped her make this mathematical spiritual equation, meaning you're good with numbers, you want to make good money, you be an accountant, and off you go. That's what she did. Worst accountant in the world,
right?
My wife. Not because she's bad with numbers, because she should never have been an accountant. Right. That was never her destiny or never her calling, whatever you want to call that. So one of the challenges is, and again, when we come back to self-worth again, this is all centers back to this. And again, this is not a cool conversation for a lot of really cool men who, are very, very determined not to address this subject. They want to talk about strategy, but they don't want to talk about self-worth necessarily. And women, but men are a little bit more resistant of this, is that we tend to lean on our talents when we don't believe that we have anything else to give the world.
Right.
Because my talents didn't lay necessarily in speaking, it didn't lay in coaching, but it's what I wanted to do. And our talent tends to be very intellectual. Impact tends to be in a spiritual space. We can sometimes use our intellect and our talents to support what we do in terms of bringing in impact to the world, doing something. When I say impact, I'm not talking about writing books, speaking, and building orphanages or whatever that happens to be. I believe impact is when you can connect to doing what you do. Actually, I've never said this before. When you connect to what your calling is, you are creating impact. You cannot but create impact. And here's why. Typically, when you connect to what you're meant to do, it always has an impact on other people. It tends to do something better for society. Secondly, it impacts you, so you become a better person. You become lighter. You become more acceptant of the world. You become more fun to be around. So you impact your wife, your kids, your husband, just your immediate environment. And then secondly, you have
right?
What's that?
And it's not work. So
it's not work.
Yeah,
and then thirdly, people start to look at you and go, "What's going on with you? What's happening? Well, what's all this happy shit? Like, well,
right.
what's that?" And they want to lean in. They want to be around you. They want to know what the hell has just gone on. What's
right.
happening? Why are you giving yourself permission to do the things you want to do? Because they aren't necessarily doing it. And if you've got good friends, they'll want to know why. If you've got friends that are semi-good, they'll start attacking you and judging you because what you're doing is exposing something in them.
Beautiful.
So to me, I feel, particularly as a parent, this is not a judgment of anybody else. I feel I have a moral obligation to make sure that I align as much as I can. And I will always have areas out of alignment. I think that's part of my acceptance. But my job is to make sure that I do exactly what I'm meant to do in this world as a guide or as an example to my children and society. And that's my job. And I get a lot of criticism. I get a lot of judgment. And a lot of the judgment comes from people who've never done my work.
Doesn't matter.
Which is interesting.
Yeah. Man, I'm living the same life as, people are judging, as you can imagine, in the fitness world is one of the most egocentric sports in the world or industries in the world. And I'm living the same parallel. This is leading into one final question I want to pull out of your brain, kind of unrelated, but you mentioned your children. You mentioned, your connection with your children. And a lot of my listeners are parents, mostly dads. We have some moms listening too. What is the best way that you connect with your children, that you set an example? Because sometimes it is hard, especially trying to coordinate parenting styles with your spouse. What's your favorite way, one or two ways that you connect with your children really at an emotional level?
Yeah, well, number one is stop trying to teach them and telling them and show them. That's just on a very basic level.
Brilliant.
So I encourage my wife to take time off. One of the best things I do, it's very simple, is I take 2 nights away from myself without a laptop, without technology, without any big intention. So I don't feel I'm under pressure going away to come up with some business idea and some creative idea, or pressure coming home to report back to my wife that I've done that. And when I encouraged my wife to do the same thing, she was very hesitant. And she kept using excuses like, well, the kids need me and everything else. Well, they don't need you. That's the story you're telling yourself.
Yeah,
What's really
going
on is you don't want to take the time because you don't feel you deserve it.
Right.
And this went back and forth for years. And finally, I did 2 things. One is I let her go emotionally. I just said, okay, done. You don't want to go away and spend time on yourself and nurture yourself. That's cool. Just one question before I disembark from this conversation and let it go, because I'm going to continue to do it. Would you like Maggie to do this when she's older, a 6-year-old? Or would you like her to be exactly like you are right now, not taking time for herself? And my wife looks at me instantly and goes, no, that's not fair. You can't use Maggie. And I said, I'll use whatever I want. I will use whatever I want, whatever I feel, because I'm using this, I believe, in a good way, even though it comes across as crude. And she goes, I would love Maggie to be able to take time for her when she's 40 something years old. And I said, well, and that was the catalyst for change. So that's number one, is show them, don't tell them. And I remember a young man who was 15 years old. Leads into the second thing, who came to the One Last Talk event with his dad. And this guy doesn't hug people. He's quite reserved, this young 14, he was 15 at the time. And at the end of the event, he comes up and he puts his arms and real hug, not a, real hug. And his dad was like, wow. He was deeply moved by the experience, not me, but the experience. And I said to him, can I ask you, Matthew, I said, what was your number one takeaway from this whole day experience? And he said, without missing a beat, he didn't go, oh, let me think about it. Well, there's 2 or 3. Without missing a beat, he said something extraordinary. He said, it's great to know that adults have problems too. And I just thought that was mesmerizing insight for us parents. And what he was basically saying was that, and I work with a lot of teenagers historically over the years, and often they just want to be heard. They don't want to be told constantly what to do, and they'd love to see a degree of vulnerability and pain from their parents. And parents tend to hide their greatest pains from the people they love. And what you're doing in that is you're not protecting your children. You're just not protecting your kids. What you're doing is you're setting them up to, number one, not be comfortable with failure, not be comfortable with pain, not be comfortable with vulnerability. And secondly, is you're also training them not to share it when it does happen. So we expect our kids to come to us if they've got problems, but we're not prepared to share ours. So if I want to connect with my kids, all I do is share. And I'm not talking about downloading deep, dark stuff.
Sure.
But when I tell my kids my struggles as a kid, my confidence, I'm telling you, take Harry Potter out of the equation. Disney doesn't get a look in. They will look at me with eyes wide open, going, and they're just intrigued. And then they create conversation and they go, yeah, well, Dad, actually, I suffer with that, or I've challenged with this. When I share my vulnerabilities, it just creates this opportunity for both of them to go both ways. It is by far the reason that I connect with my kids in the way that I do. And by the way, one final caveat, I'm still struggling as a parent, and I always will. But I think that's the final thing, actually. I'd love to say this finally, is that one of the greatest pieces of advice I can give any parent is, in addition to those other things, also accept at a core level that no matter what you do, your kids are going to be messed up. And what I mean by that is don't give up on them, but stop trying to be the perfect parent, because it doesn't exist. And I know some people want to go for perfection. If they hit 90%, that's good. I don't go for perfection to hit 90%. I want to be 70, and then I want to be 72 and 74 and 75. Just keep building on it. But let go of the fact that no matter what you do, if you cuddle them for their entire life, they were over-cuddled. If you don't cuddle them all, they were ignored. No matter what you do, you're going to screw them up. And they're going to be in therapy in 20 or 30 years from now. But what it does, it gives you a degree of peace of mind, so you can let go of the enormous responsibility to bring up the perfect human in an imperfect world.
Right. Man, completely agree with that. So, we like yourself, we all try to be this great parent, but you realize it's all subjective to their interpretation. You get one child 100%. That interprets it this way, one child that interprets it that way. So at the end of the day, all you can do is love them, man. That's all I say is, like, all I want to do is love them and play with them. And that's it.
And what if we added, and you're 100%, what if we added one little sprinkle of sea salt in there? What happens if we could love ourselves and then love our children? Because it's a very different energy.
Absolutely. And I guess potentially love our spouse as well. I'm sure seeing a loving relationship is helpful. So
that's hugely important. And again, that comes back to us. Everything I know about couples and relationships and working with them, it all comes back to our relationship with ourselves first as the foundation, as opposed to working on the external elements, which are important. Starts with us at home all the time.
So Phil, I'm intrigued by your trip to India, man. Tell me all about that and where our listeners can find out more.
Yeah, I'm a huge, massive fan of travel. Travel has been a huge education.
It looks awesome.
Yeah, I love creating experience for people, and this year we're running our first. It's called a Brave Adventure. So basically, it's braveadventure.com is the URL, and basically we're doing just an epic trip in India where we're going to go to Delhi. We're going to go to an amazing giving project just outside of Delhi that's just mesmerizing, hauntingly amazing, and then we're going to basically head up to the base of the Himalayas. And we're going to do the highest road trip in the world. We're going to have cars driven for us, and we're going to head across the Himalayas and drop down into this valley. We're going to do whitewater rafting. We're going to do hiking for those who want it. Again, it's, if they don't want to get in the water, that's cool. And then we're going to head up into the Himalayas for a night and camp out. And then we're going to come back down and finish off in a palace in the mountains. And we've rented out the whole palace and then head home.
That sounds incredible. How many people will that be?
There'll be probably about 20 people. So I do, my stuff is very intimate. I know some people have intimate to them as 100 or 200. For me, intimate is when I do my retreats in Ireland or whatever, there's maybe 24 in Ireland or 26 and then 20, maybe 22 in India in total. And also have wonderful conversations along the way. Imagine just stopping and sitting on the edge of a mountain in the Himalayas and talking about life and what's possible and what we can see and what we can imagine for ourselves and people around us. And I find that organic, not forced, but that organic conversation and presenting the clients with maybe a question to consider. And you take that same question in a tube on the way to work in New York, and you take the same question on a beach in Jamaica with your kids running around. You take that same question and you do it in the Himalayas after a lot of great experiences, it just lands deeper. And I find that what comes out is more richer as a result of that. So, it's going to be special, and it's a one-off experience, which is not a sales scarcity thing. It's just we're doing the Brave Adventure. Our Brave Adventure is just going to be a one-off experience in different countries or different parts of the world every year.
Man, as soon as I saw it, I told my wife, hey, this is where I'm going to be. I got 10 days booked in India, so you might just see me there, man.
Yeah, that'd
Phil,
be amazing.
Thank you so much, man. Where can people find more about you and your awesome stuff?
Thank you. philipmckernan.com is my main website. And then I mentioned a concept called One Last Talk, onelasttalk.com, which is something very close to my heart. And it's an event that people can have a look at that, and all the explanations and the information is there.
Amazing. And of course, that'll be linked in the show notes. Phil, thank you so much, man. Truthfully,
you're welcome.
Came into my life at the perfect time, and I'm sure a lot of listeners are going to appreciate this.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And thank you so much for being so open and vulnerable yourself. That's that means a lot to me, and I'm sure your listeners really get that as well. So thank you.